Hello everyone, thank you for joining us today. A big welcome to this eco-business conversation, Packaging Waste, a Circular Future, or Talking in Circles. I'm Seah Kian Peng, Managing Director of Eco-Business, and I'm delighted to be your host today. I'd first like to thank Minister Grace Fu and the Ministry of Sustainability and the Environment for being part of this event today, and also to FairPrice Group, its CEO, Mr. Seah Kian Peng, and the FairPrice team for their partnership. Welcome, Minister and Mr. Seah, and thank you for joining us today. Our dialogue today shines an important spotlight on a critical issue. Packaging has made life more convenient for billions of people worldwide, including in Singapore. It has enabled many products to be shipped across countries, lengthened the shelf life of food, and enabled us to eat and drink on the go, and maintain high standards of hygiene, which is particularly important given the coronavirus pandemic. But packaging, especially single-use plastics, has become a double-edged sword. It is choking our landfills, polluting our rivers and oceans, and harming our biodiversity. Even humans are ingesting plastic. In Singapore, over 7 million tons of solid waste was generated last year, out of which nearly 1 million tons were from plastic alone, and only a dismal 4% of that was recycled. With our only landfill, Semakau Island, running out of space, it is clear that we need a solution to curb our growing waste problem. Singapore has launched a zero waste master plan to target packaging waste, food waste, and e-waste, and the concept of circular economy, in which waste is eliminated and resources are continuously used, is growing in popularity. But are we making real progress? Or are we talking in circles? How can businesses, consumers, and policymakers step up to the challenge? Today, we are delighted to have with us in the studio the leading voices and experts working on this issue to share with us their perspectives in a fireside chat and later on in an exciting live debate in which our audience, you, will get to vote who will be the winning side. A huge welcome to all our speakers and to our audience. Thank you for joining us. Before we begin, a few housekeeping pointers. This session is being streamed on a dedicated website for our registered participants who will have the opportunity to interact with each other, share their thoughts, and ask questions to our speakers in the chat box that you can find to the right of your screen. This session is also being live streamed on YouTube and Facebook, and I'd like to encourage those joining us on these platforms to also engage with the conversation in the comments section. Our hashtags today for today's event for social media are packaging waste, plastic packaging, EB conversations, and hashtag FairPriceSG. Right, we have a packed agenda today, so I'm going to invite our first speaker, Mr. Seah Kian Peng, Group Chief Executive Officer of FairPrice Group, to give us the opening address. Kian Peng, the floor is yours.
Ms. Grace Fu, Minister for Sustainability and the Environment, Ms. Seah Kian Peng, Founder and Managing Director, Eco-Business, distinguished speakers, guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon to all. Thank you for inviting me to today's forum. Sustainability is an important area that is constantly evolving and a growing concern that requires both businesses' commitment as well as the individuals, all of us, our attention. Our government has also called out environmental sustainability as a strategic priority for Singapore. Increasingly, organizations are stepping up their sustainability efforts, working in close collaboration with stakeholders, other businesses, and the government to address this issue holistically. As a responsible retailer and an industry leader, NTUC FairPrice proactively champions sustainability in the various aspects of our operations. And this is aligned with our strong commitment to make lives better for the community. For sure, This is an ongoing journey, and there is much to do. Let me state categorically that FairPrice cares for the environment, and we recognize the importance of contributing to a better world. And we do this by adopting various eco-friendly initiatives in our operations, in our processes, and throughout our stores. We took the lead to advocate responsible plastic bag use through the FairPrice Green Reward Scheme, which we introduced way back in 2007. Shoppers were given a 10-cent rebate when they brought their own bag to the stores. For over this decade that we had this scheme, we gave out more than $4 million in rebates to encourage shoppers to bring their own bag. And this helped save an average of about 10 million plastic bags a year. 2 years ago, we conducted a review and found that while there has been an increase in the number of plastic bags saved, progress appeared to have plateaued. So in an effort to save more plastic bags, we introduced the FairPrice Plastic Bag Management Program, a more comprehensive approach which looks at not only our internal processes, but also public education, partnerships, and donations. So part of this program includes the $1 million of Sustainability Fund, which is allocated to partners like eco-business to help create greater awareness on this issue through webinars like today's session. Another initiative under this program is the No Plastic Bag Initiative, where we charge 10 or 20 cents should customers require plastic bags. The intent of this initiative is to encourage shoppers to bring their own bag and to reduce plastic bag use. It is not to charge shoppers more, as has been suggested by some, since all the proceeds from this fee go towards the sponsorship of environment and community causes. In fact, the approach that we have adopted to promote responsible use of single-use plastic bags has always been a balanced one. And this stance was affirmed in a recent plastic bag study by the Nanyang Technological University, which was widely reported, in fact, just last week. The environmental impact of different types of bags in the study concluded that reusable plastic bags were the most eco-friendly option given that we incinerate our waste, and this makes the subject of biodegradation irrelevant. The study also urged shoppers to bring their own bag to reduce single-use plastic bags, a practice that we continue to advocate, and we should certainly do it. To enhance public education, we are also working closely with various government ministries and organizations to educate customers on the various green initiatives. And the agencies include NEA, Singapore Environment Council, Eco-Business, and Zero Waste SG. Apart from plastic bags, FairPrice has also set up an internal network of stakeholders, which involve our suppliers to gather the necessary information and to make recommendations with regards to product packaging. And we are doing this in preparation for the mandatory packaging reporting, which will begin next year. More details on this will be shared at a later stage, but for now, like all of you, I'm also eagerly waiting to hear from the participants of this webinar on their perspectives surrounding the topic of plastic packaging. Before I conclude, I'd like to once again thank Eco-Business for organizing this important forum. I commend their work, I commend their efforts to galvanize the community in tackling this important issue of sustainability. I would also like to thank Ms. Grace Fu, Minister for Sustainability and Environment, and who is leading our national efforts to ensure a sustainable, resource-efficient, climate-resilient Singapore, for taking the time off her busy schedule to join us. I'd like to also thank everyone here for your interest, for your support in creating a more sustainable environment. I wish everyone a fruitful forum today. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those insights, Kian Peng. I'd now like to invite Ms. Grace Fu, Minister for Sustainability and the Environment, to give us her keynote address. Minister, please.
Ms. Jessica Cham, Managing Director, Eco-Business, Mr. Seah Kian Peng, Group CEO, FairPrice Group. Fellow guests and viewers, good afternoon to all of you. I'd like to first thank Eco-Business and FairPrice Group for bringing us together for today's webinar. The management and reduction of packaging waste is an issue of growing salience. With rising consumption, packaging waste, food waste, and e-waste are becoming increasingly challenging to deal with. These are the three key waste streams that Singapore is targeting under our Zero Waste Master Plan. Packaging and food waste are generated in large quantities and have low recycling rates. E-waste, while a smaller proportion of the waste generated, could be detrimental to the environment if not properly treated. Managing these waste streams well will be our focus as we strive towards zero waste and in extending the lifespan of Semakau landfill beyond 2035. Today, our focus is packaging waste, which accounted for 1/3 of our domestic waste. But let me first say that packaging has many useful functions. It helps reduce food spoilage, extend the shelf life of food, and protect our products as they move through the logistics chain. Important information is also printed on product packaging, such as nutritional value, best buy and expiry dates, and safety instructions. Therefore, our approach should not be to eliminate packaging, but to see how we can optimize the use of packaging and ensure a sustainable end-of-life management of packaging waste. We make good headway on this since the establishment of the Singapore Packaging Agreement, or SPA, in 2007. This is a voluntary joint initiative by the government, industry, and non-governmental organizations to reduce packaging waste. Through improvements to packaging design and optimizing the use of packaging materials, a cumulative reduction of about 54,000 tons of packaging waste and 130 million in savings was achieved between 2007 and 2020. This bears testimony to the fact that making environmentally friendly changes can benefit the bottom line. But we need to do more. Our recycling rate for plastics, which makes up a large component of our packaging waste, stood at just 4% in 2019. We need a serious, concerted effort by all parties, the government, industry, and consumers, to make bigger strides. And how? First, the Resource Sustainability Act, introduced last year, gave us the regulatory framework to target the three waste streams. For packaging waste, we will start with the Mandatory Packaging Reporting, or MPR, framework from 2021. This will be followed by the Extended Producer Responsibility, or EPR, framework. Under the MPR framework, businesses with an annual turnover of more than $10 million will be required to report the types and amount of packaging materials they place on the market annually. They include producers of packaged products and retailers such as supermarkets. They will also submit their plans to reduce, reuse, or recycle packaging to NEA. This will lead companies to look at the potential for waste reduction within their business operations. To help companies fulfill these obligations, NEA has partnered the Singapore Manufacturing Federation to introduce the Packaging Partnership Program. This industry-led program will help to build industry capability in packaging 3Rs, exchange best practices, and move companies towards sustainable packaging waste management. NEA is also working with the framework for a deposit refund scheme, or DRS, for beverage containers. Under the DRS, producers such as soft drink companies will be required to fund the collection of used beverage containers. Consumers receive a refund when they return their empty beverage containers. The DRS will serve as the first phase of the Extended Producer Responsibility EPR framework. Under the EPR, producers will be responsible for the collection and treatment of their end-of-life products. This will increase recycling rates downstream and encourage innovation upstream, spurring the design of products that will require less packaging or material and are more easily recycled. These regulations will create economic opportunities and capture new areas of growth in the area of sustainability. For example, the DRS will aggregate post-consumer plastic waste, such as PET beverage bottles, providing a steady supply of feedstock for local recycling capacity. We are actively engaging companies that are interested to set up mechanical recycling capabilities in Singapore. We are also pursuing chemical recycling solutions to treat plastics that are not suitable for mechanical recycling. These efforts will close the plastic loop, create high-value products from our waste, and create jobs for Singaporeans. Even as the government works with the industries, consumers have an important role to play. Consumer expectation and demand for sustainable products and packaging will drive and influence product design. For instance, when purchasing a product, look for its quality and not its packaging as a proxy, and support businesses that make an effort in optimizing packaging resources. More sustainable packaging reduces the amount of resources used and carbon emissions generated in its production. Another way for consumers is to reduce the use of disposables, such as single-use carrier bags. The NEA launched the second run of the Say Yes to Waste Less campaign last month to encourage this. It is working with close to 100 commercial partners, covering more than 2,100 premises, to encourage consumers to take simple, positive actions, such as bringing reusables and declining disposable for takeaways and online food orders. FairPrice is one such partner. They have taken a proactive stance by initiating a month-long no plastic bag trial in September 2019. The initiatives sought to reduce the use of single-use plastics carrier bags. By requiring customers to pay for them, this initiative was subsequently extended for a year from November 2019, and the number of participating stores increased from 7 to 25. I commend FairPrice for taking a lead in the supermarket sector and urge other players to follow suit. Will this work? What more can we do? We're encouraging public conversations and action through a citizens' work group on reducing excessive consumption of disposables. The work group convened last month, and we hope to partner citizens to co-create and co-deliver practical and inclusive solutions to deal with this issue. Our individual actions as consumers, businesses, and communities contribute towards the bigger vision of a green and sustainable Singapore. How we come together to reduce and recycle package waste will be one substantive ways to realize this vision. By working together, pushing boundaries, and exploring opportunities and innovative solutions, we can transform Singapore's environment for the better with new and exciting green jobs. Together, let us build a vibrant and sustainable Singapore. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister, for those perspectives. We will certainly be expanding on those in our fireside chat. I'd now like to invite both Minister and Mr. Seah to join us for our fireside chat, where we will be delving deeper into the issue. So stay with us. Thank you, everyone, for joining us again. I'd like to thank Minister and Kian Peng for your opening thoughts. I thought that was very interesting, especially actually the NTU study, which actually I think, kind of disrupted the myth that single-use plastic bags are the most uneco-friendly. But that said, I think that there is tremendous interest in the plastic packaging issue. And Minister, if you don't mind, I'm just going to open the fireside chat with a question for you. Plastic packaging is a topic that's obviously been quite emotive and captured the imagination of our population. And the government has always had that position that there is no need to ban single-use plastic because, one, all our trash gets incinerated in Singapore, and two, is not the least eco-friendly. But this does not really address the problem that plastic manufacturers are still extracting virgin fossil fuels and that Singapore is still consuming a huge amount of resources. Our landfill, Semakau landfill, is also running out of space. So will the Singapore government consider changing its position on this in the future?
So actually, we have been changing our positions because technology is moving very quickly in this area and we want to be relevant given the technologies that are progressing. So actually, you're right in the sense that it's a highly emotive topic. Then when you see sea turtles being stuck in plastic bags, it's really not a sight that we like to see. And microplastics floating in the ocean, affecting our wildlife, our marine wildlife, affecting our health ultimately. So I think we're very conscious about those issues, but let us just step back, take one step back and ask ourselves, in the countries where there is ban on plastic bags, how do they treat their general waste or household waste? They would buy garbage bags that's made of plastics. And for us, living in a very dense, high-rise environment, we also have to think about the practice of bagging our waste. And if we do not use any packaging at all, actually it will cause us other problems, hygiene, rodents, pest infestation, smell, and so on. So actually we have, over the years, gotten people to package our household waste and general waste and to throw it down the chutes in one bag. And that really has improved the level of hygiene here. The issue then is really how do we reduce wastage? In other words, how do we reuse as much as we can? And also, a more important downstream issue is that how do we separate the waste stream so that we can find clever ways of recycling and reusing it. And we have seen how technologies have progressed to a stage where we can actually extract more value out of the waste stream. One of the problems that we have now is a very low oil price, and that has depressed the price of virgin plastics. So we are going to think about investing in our own capacity to look at recycling the plastics ourselves and to get new oil out of this. In other words, extract what is possible so that it becomes a feedstock to our energy or chemical sectors. That way, we can find new life for our plastics beyond just its simple utilitarian function of packaging our waste. So I really urge Singaporeans to start really dwelling into this area about material science, because understanding how we can recover the substances make us a lot more sustainable. And I think this is where the exciting area of sustainability is.
Thank you very much, Minister, and I'm very encouraged to hear that government is flexible and we're constantly adapting legislation. Maybe I can go to Kian Peng. You know, NTUC had this pilot where you started charging for plastic bags, and it's not a ban, but you know, it makes consumers realize the cost of what they're purchasing. Why not do it for all your stores? You know, some retailers like IKEA has done it for a few years, so perhaps we can hear your perspectives on the challenges that you've encountered.
Thanks, Jessica. Indeed, when we first started, actually, as I mentioned earlier, we started by actually encouraging people to bring your own bags, and we gave a little rebate. That little rebate added up to $4 million over 10 years. So we wanted to give it a different look at it, and therefore, you're right, last year we implemented this pilot. It's coming to a year, so my team is getting all the feedback and to see what else we could do. But even as we were embarking on this initiative, we also commissioned a study to look into the consumers, what they were telling us. Minister has rightly pointed out, and in fact, it's something that all of us can relate to. I think the way we dispose of our plastic bags as a country is one consideration. The way in which we dispose of the way we live and the way we dispose of our food waste is another dimension. Some of the consumers in that survey, when they indicated to us why they were not supportive, because they said, number one, quite a few of them, they said, well, they see this as a service provided by supermarkets. Secondly, and a more pertinent point, is that they see the need for the plastic bags to store their food waste and to dispose of it properly. So I think these are not, if government, if ministry had, like in many governments, just impose a ban, legislate and impose a ban. On the one hand, it solves, I would say, part of the problem, but it creates other problems. And we are not actually solving the problem holistically. So I think this initial study that we have, 25 stores, it is, I would say, a game changer, but we are studying the results. What can we do? Who should we involve? And in fact, Minister herself also encouraged others, you know, it requires really the whole community, all the stakeholders to come in together to put a concerted effort, just as it requires consumers, individuals, for all of us to also see how we can play our part to reducing the use for plastic bags.
Thank you very much. If I can just push back a little, because if I think about the UK, for example, you know, the government did not ban single-use plastic, but they legislated a 5 cents charge. And overnight, 90% of usage of plastic bags came down. And I think it's the excessive usage that we want to curb here, not a complete ban, because as you mentioned, you know, it's there for hygiene, it's there for a lot of purposes. So can we perhaps see something like that where there is a basic charge for it and that would help Singaporeans understand the value of this material?
I definitely think so. I think, but in those studies, immediately when there is a charge, the amount of use goes down significantly. But do that measure a few months later, I think it went up a bit. So let's not be seduced by the 90% drop for the first month. But I think let's look at it longer term. But I do agree. I think number one, I think single-use plastics really should be eliminated. All of us, you know, hand to heart, how many reusable bags do we have at our home? Plenty, you know, wherever you stay. Let's use them. Let's use them. And secondly, can we do with less plastic bags? For sure. I have many customers, sometimes they make the jobs a bit tougher for my cashiers. They said they want it double bag. They want more bags. So You know, it's easier said than done, but if all of us just take what we need, don't take excessive. And I think, you know, as I mentioned, you know, all of us have plenty of reusable bags. Let's put them to good use. And a combination of the two, I think this is the way where we can holistically address this problem.
Thank you, Minister.
And I'll be very frank that our consideration really is the low-income family, who, if you require them to purchase plastic bags for garbage disposal, they either would have to fork out additional money for that, or they'll decide not to use plastics to bag their waste, which I think will lead to other problems, you know. So I'm also very mindful about the impact on sort of public hygiene and sanitation. So it's something that there's no perfect solution, but I think we're looking for solution. We definitely want to try out in different modalities and different formats. So if I think the audience has any suggestions, we'll be quite happy to consider them, really.
Thank you very much, Minister. On this point of hygiene, I'd like to speak briefly about COVID-19. Obviously, COVID-19 has really shed a light on how critical plastics are for maintaining hygiene, but it has also suppressed this recycling industry. Virgin plastic is now cheaper, much cheaper than recycled plastic, and therefore the whole circularity of plastic is being threatened. So how do we balance the needs for hygiene and public health with that of environmental concerns? It's very tough, so I don't envy you, but we'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, actually, it's true because, you know, in the initial months of circuit breaker, we have definitely seen an increase in the use of plastics by the healthcare sector for obvious reason. They need to protect themselves and they need to protect public health. But because aviation has almost hollowed out, so there's actually a huge demand for aviation oil that has vanished. So actually, price of oil has plummeted, and also the price of feedstock to plastic has plummeted. So actually, it has really put a pressure, downward pressure on the price of virgin plastics that has already started in 2019, actually. We've seen it coming down. That's why 2019, 2018, actually, we have seen recycling rates coming down because there's really no offtake. Plus the fact that some of the countries have stopped importation of plastic waste. So actually, there's no offtake for the recycled plastics. So we've decided to look at sort of internal capacity to do plastics recycling, and we want to do it in a way that's economically sustainable. So how do we collect? How do we sort at the start of the waste stream? How do we then recycle in a clever way so that we can maximize the value out of it is something that we are studying very closely and intently. But the idea really is that in the COVID time, plastic consumption has gone up, not just also in the healthcare sector. We stay at home a lot more, we order in a lot more, we do a lot more e-commerce, which comes with a lot of packaging, boxes, plastics, and you name it, we have it. So actually, we are also partly responsible for the increase in waste. And again, sorting at source correctly, allowing us the maximum option of recycling and also recovering the worth, I think is the way to go. So that's why I talked about focusing on specific waste streams and thinking about ways to close individual loops. Just like we have closed the loop on water, we should also close the loop on plastics, on e-waste, and on food waste, for example.
That's really encouraging to hear, Minister. And I think, you know, you've hit a pertinent point there about COVID and actually the e-commerce industry and packaging, you know, kind of exploding. And our conversation here today is about packaging waste. And therefore, I'm very encouraged to hear about the mandatory reporting framework that's coming in. And perhaps, Kian Peng, I can get you to share your thoughts, as this is something that's going to hit the private sector soon. What challenges do you face in thinking about the group's resource and packaging use, given that now, as a big retailer, you have to report on your packaging use?
Well, I think as a leader in this industry, I think it is incumbent on all of us to, first of all, to support and comply with these requirements. I think the steps that are required, I think internally we have formed a group of stakeholders to also involve us in actively involving our suppliers. I think we need to go upstream to work with them. As we say, it's not my problem, it's not your problem, it's our problem. And it is only together we can come up with the solutioning. Not easy, and Minister in her opening remarks also talked about, I think there is also, we need to recognize that there is value in some of these labels. People do, as a consumer, I want to know where this product comes from, who makes it, what's the nutritional information. All these are important information. So I think we need to take on board all this and yet do our part towards reducing, whether it's plastic waste, food waste, packaging waste. All these are not no easy solutions. I think it just needs all of us to come together.
And I'm so encouraged to hear that NTUC is already thinking about working with suppliers and stakeholders, because that's exactly the objective of such a scheme, is to get people focusing their attention on packaging and start thinking about how to manage it better. And I think with reporting, it starts a focus by the management and hopefully reducing over time and optimizing packaging. That's really good news to me, and to see that already we see the effect coming on very quickly.
That's wonderful. I think we really need a lot of industry collaboration for this to really take off. But just on the point of recycling targets, you mentioned it briefly, Minister, that you've seen recycling rates going down. Singapore has a target of 30%, which frankly is quite low already, because if you look at Nordic countries, for example, their recycling rates are at 70%. These are household recycling rates. So in terms of Singapore reaching its recycling targets, how do you envision our country to get there?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, we are focusing on, what we call 80-20 rules, the few 20 items that account for 80% of our waste. So we are starting with this few that we talked about: food waste, packaging waste, and also e-waste. Why do we do that? It's because by focusing our attention, we can look at the solutions that's appropriate for each of the waste stream, because they will need different solutions. Like food will be treated quite differently from plastics, for example, or paper or glass. So we need to focus on that and look at how to tackle the bottlenecks. It could be behavioral, it could be infrastructural, it can be facilities. People need to find better ways to drop off their glass bottles, for example. It's when we start looking at it, then we will find solutions. So what is interesting now is that when we have sort of collective of business coming together, NTUC with upstream, downstream suppliers, and also customers coming together to work out a solution that optimizes the whole chain. We are beginning to see that also, for example, in food waste. There's interesting innovation coming in. So, for example, we tried out in Tampines the black soldier fly that feeds on food waste, and then they become feedstock to the fish. So that's a sort of food loop that we are closing. So when we start segregating the waste better, we can find much more effective way of recycling it. And in a way, it's a realization with plastics. When virgin plastics sort of became so much cheaper, and when there's ban on importation in some of the countries, we realized that we need to do something ourselves. Otherwise, we will not be able to crack this difficult nut. Right? So we need to find that solution. And importantly is to get businesses, get households to recycle well by splitting them, sorting them well upstream. And that involves a lot of community effort, and we are working with Citizens Work Group to further that discussion.
That's very interesting, because right now all our recyclables are commingled, right? And there's always this discussion about to what extent you need to separate it if it all goes into the recycling truck. Will we see more different trucks collecting different waste streams?
That's another calculation that we need to make, because when you have different trucks coming in, obviously they have their own carbon footprint, right? Different collection work stream, and then being sent to different facilities. What we are doing actually is to build facilities that could sort them, so that we find the optimal way of treating, which is optimized on collection, because as you know, we live in very highly urban, difficult to have so many trucks going around. Yeah? That's expensive. But at the same time, find ways to sort it effectively, and then to probably have material recovery facility close by, so that we don't have to truck it to each other, we don't have to truck it from glass to paper and so on. When they're close by, probably in the same building, multi-story, then they can actually find a very, lowest carbon footprint way to treat the source among themselves. We're also looking at some recovery facility in the Tuas Nexus, where we are bringing food waste with our wastewater treatment and incinerator. And when they are placed together, we find that there's actually opportunities for us to optimize the various waste streams together. Interesting results coming out from there.
Really exciting. I'm going to come back to that, but I'd like to actually come to Kian Peng on sustainability targets. I mean, FairPrice is a large, huge footprint, obviously being the size and one of the biggest retailers here in Singapore. How is the group responding to the sustainability targets, whether it's recycling targets or whether it's reducing carbon emissions? How are you responding as a group?
Well, first, actually, you may not realize, Jessica, actually for us, we have been publishing our sustainability report.
I know that.
Even though we are not required, you know, so because we believe in it. I think this is something which NTUC, FairPrice, and the rest of the NTUC group is something that we subscribe to. So our targets are out there. It's in the open. It's, you know, anyone can check on it, and we are measuring ourselves, putting ourselves to scrutiny. I think the targets that we set, I was just looking through in terms of food waste. We've seen about 11% reduction compared to the previous years. I think there are so many things that we need to do, right? But as I said, you know, we really require the collaboration of a lot of stakeholders, consumers themselves as well as our upstream suppliers. And then, you know, even within our stores, can we get more of them getting the green mark? Right now, Minister, we have 36 of our stores which have attained the green mark from BCA. I think, again, reducing carbon footprint is another thing. So there are so many aspects to talking about sustainability. It's not just food waste, it's not just plastic waste, it's energy, the whole gamut of things. But if we look at it, sometimes you look at it and say it's a huge problem. Where do we start? We are starting everywhere, and we are starting in our own way. You could say baby steps, but it's a start. And I really need more people to get on board this journey. And again, I also call out my other players in the market, in the various spaces. I think we all have a job to do. There are many jobs to be done. We just need to get on board this journey for our sake and for future generations.
Thanks very much, Kian Peng. And I think it's very encouraging that you have a sustainability report. And I would encourage, you know, anyone who is not mandated to disclose to actually measure, because you can't improve what you don't measure. Coming back to Minister, you mentioned just now about Singapore's first multi-recycling facility. I think it's a very exciting opportunity. And I think it's also born out of global trends, because it used to be more economical for Singapore to export its waste, like many other countries in the world. And I think things started shifting about 2 years ago when China said no to the world's waste. And then, you know, Thailand, Malaysia, all these countries started saying the same thing. And countries are now suddenly thinking, wow, what am I going to do with my own waste streams? How do I upcycle them and create value out of them? So I'd love to hear from you. What opportunities do you see in Singapore processing its own waste, perhaps even coming up with a new industry and exporting this capability, or maybe we'll see even more multi-recycling facilities in Singapore?
Yes, so I remember visiting one of these multi-material recovery facility in Europe, and I was quite amazed by the technology that was implemented. Basically can sort all sorts of waste, including, for example, paper, colored paper from white paper, and plastics, colored paper from clear plastics. So I said that, wow, the technology is fantastic. And I remember the plant manager saying this to me. He says that, just give me a material that has its own physical characteristics, I can find the science to sort it for you. So that's engineering and material science. And I think this is an area where science can really play an important role in coming up with the solutions. And I think the fastest we are able to do that and find an economic case for it, I think the better the world will be. And in a way, the development as countries sort of stop importation and so on, actually is forcing some of the innovation to take place. And then I believe that what will come, as Kian Peng has alluded to, is a whole, you know, downstream activity of capturing data, optimizing data, data analysis, and also the engineering solution that will come with it. So I would firmly believe that this is where I think the green jobs would be, because we have to find solutions for our problems, and we recognize that we cannot be living tomorrow, living today with tomorrow's prosperity or tomorrow's resources. So how do we treat that? I think it's our responsibility to do so. And I think if we are able to do it across companies, whether it's downstream, upstreams, or sometimes across adjacency, that's where we will find interesting solutions. So the downstream waste can actually be another industry's feedstock. And when we have that conversation, like we're doing with the food industry, like the chemical industry, I think interesting ideas are being discussed. And with the research that we have been doing, I think I'm quite confident that we'll find new solutions to our problem.
That's really exciting. Do you think Singapore is a little late to the game though, because we've only just started thinking about our own recycling facilities, or can we leapfrog, into the newest?
Actually, we have been doing some R&D for some time. I don't think that we are late, but at the same time, if we learn quick enough, I think we can find good solutions. In a way, I think, this is a problem that all countries are facing. And it is important for us to work with one another, not as competitors, but really as collaborators to find solutions for our global problems.
Yeah, totally agree on that. And I think with sustainability problems, pre-competitive collaboration is very important, where you're working with rival companies to actually solve sustainability challenges. On that note, I would like to, maybe ask both of you our last question today, because we have, an exciting debate that's coming up. What is the one takeaway or call to action that you'd like to leave with our audience today? Kian Peng, maybe I start with you first.
Bring your reusable bag everywhere you go. In fact, bring more than one.
Thank you very much, Minister.
Take packaging waste into consideration when you buy. When you buy something, think about the waste that comes along with it, and reject the shoebox that you don't need, yes, or reduce the packaging that comes along with the product.
Both very good nuggets of wisdom. Thank you very much, both of you, for your insights and this robust discussion. I'm afraid that's all that we have time for, so thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. In this next segment, we will be playing a short video for you, where we will take to the streets and ask our residents how they feel about plastic bags. So please stay tuned.
Plastic bags, they're everywhere. Single-use plastic bags are a major environmental concern. Around the world, we produce 5 trillion plastic bags every year. Placed side by side, they can encircle the world 7 times. At home, in Singapore, shoppers consume over 2 million plastic bags a day. That's 25 bags every second. But more and more companies are encouraging customers to BYOB. Bring your own bags. A consumer sentiment survey saw over 70% of shoppers expressing support. 35% of shoppers shared that they do not bring their own bags. And only 15% of shoppers bring their own bags all of the time. We hit the streets to find out why. What's your take on plastic bags? There are many retail shops now charging for plastic bags, right? How do you feel about it?
I use all these plastic bags to pick up the poo for my dog.
Wow, you brought the plastic bags from home to come grocery shopping?
Yes, to save on that 20 cents.
Oh, wow, okay. So why don't you bring your own bag?
Oh.
Why?
If you're in the middle of something and then unexpectedly you're planning to buy things and you are not bringing back, so you have no choice, right?
In Singapore, you still need to bag your trash.
Yes.
So it's better to repurpose these plastic bags than to buy new ones.
Okay, so I want to put a challenge to you now. So if you don't have plastic bags, what other items or what other bags can you use to put your rubbish?
Plastic bags basically, I think.
Any other alternatives?
None that I can think of.
We're also thinking of ways to replace it. But when it comes to throwing trash at home, I still don't know what's the replacement. That's why we still take plastic.
What do you think? Are there alternatives? Are there other options? Like?
Waste paper.
Waste paper.
You throw trash?
Magazines, yeah? Maybe?
Never really thought about it.
You got a tissue box, right? How about
Yeah.
maybe the plastic for the tissue box?
Yeah, to a certain extent, yes.
I'll give you an example, right? To line your bin. So will you consider using something like this plastic bag here to line the bin?
Yes.
You know, the plastic from your eggplant, maybe?
I
line
know.
your-
I didn't think about that.
Okay. So is this something that
Good idea.
you can think about it moving forward?
Yes.
I've been thinking like, do we actually need to line our bin? Because in the end, I know my dad, he washes the bins every day anyway.
Let's say maybe you buy chips, big packet of chips. Have you ever considered using those big bags for
Oh yeah, I
line
use
your
that.
bin? Oh, you use that as well?
Yeah.
Great, fantastic. I've seen today that you have done your grocery shopping and you didn't use any plastic bags. So can I ask the reason why?
Why need to waste resources lah? Like we still have a recycle bag, we have a recycle bag, and then it's nicer.
It's a very good approach. And furthermore, a lot of people donating their bags.
Yes.
So if let's say you forget to bring that day, you can just borrow one or two. Another day you bring it back.
You are just one person. Do you think it helps?
I think not only me lah. A lot of people, every one person add up would be many people.
I think it's good that the retail stores in Singapore, they are charging for the plastic bags. We should all do our part for the environment.
Protect the planet. High five, Patrick. Well done. I was surprised how many people are already bringing their own bags to the grocery store. Certainly, public consciousness around plastic bags is changing, but more needs to be done. The simple action of bringing your own bag to the grocery store can have a major environmental impact. It is essential that we have the right knowledge to make informed decisions. Here are some simple ways to reduce your plastic waste. 1. Educate yourself on the impact plastic has on our world. 2. Say no to plastic bags whenever possible and bring reusable bags. 3. Avoid disposable plastic containers and cutleries. 4. Buy reusable plastic water bottles and takeaway containers. And 5. Find creative ways to line your bin and pick up your dog's poop. A plastic bag can take up to 1,000 years to degrade. There are much better ways of leaving our footprint on this planet. Don't you think?
Bring your own bag.
Very good. Bring your own bag.
Bring your own bag.
I hope you enjoyed that video. It certainly provides an insight as to how Singaporeans think about plastic bags. Now, we are just about to begin the highlight of our event, the debate. The motion that our distinguished speakers will be debating today is, this House believes that the industry's excessive packaging problem is the result of consumers' expectations. Before it begins, I'd like to invite all of you to take part in a quick poll on the motion. You can click yes or no in the poll that's being flashed before you now. This poll is also being conducted on Facebook and YouTube, so please take a minute to join us. And in a few minutes, we will be showing you the live results. I think this will provide a great start for our debate. And now I'd like to introduce the moderator for our debate today, Mr. Augustine Antuvan, who is our moderator at large and a veteran broadcast journalist for more than 20 years and a former Channel News Asia executive producer. I'll now hand it over to Augustine to introduce our speakers. Give us a minute to get them on and stay tuned.
Thank you so much, Jessica, and thank you to all of you who have been watching the proceedings of this discussion from earlier on, and do stay with us. As promised, we're about to kick off with the debate, and of course I've got a whole bunch of things that I need to coordinate, and I can already see the results are coming in. The motion for the debate, the industry's excessive packaging problem is the result of consumers' expectations. Do you agree? And right now, the numbers that are coming in on our menti.com is 47% agree and 57, well, I can't make out the numbers there, 53% disagree, all right? And so joining us on the panel, on my right and on my left, I have with us for the motion, Xiao Tan, who is the Asia Pacific President for RWDC Industries, and Mohit Grover, who is the Executive Director for Deloitte Singapore. And on my left, against the motion, we have Jack Dua, who is the CEO of the Alliance to End Plastic Waste, and Pek Hai Lin, who is the Executive Director for Zero Waste Singapore. Can we give them all a round of applause? All right. Actually, debaters, you all can clap for each other. Okay, they're very serious people. They've been thinking and planning, for quite some time, and they've been, putting a lot of effort into this topic. So we're going to have a 4-minute introductory input on both sides. So all 4 speakers will get 4 minutes each, and around the 3rd minute, I will ring this bell once, and if you hear it the 2nd time, that means your entire 4 minutes are up, and then you need to stop, right? If you continue to speak, I'll just get my audio engineer to fade your microphones down. I'm joking. I'm sure they will keep their comments to the time. And so, without any further ado, to keep this all going, to kick off the discussion for today, once again, the motion, this House believes industry's excessive packaging problem is the result of consumers' expectations. To kick off for the motion, Xiao Tan, the floor is yours.
Thank you. This motion, I believe there are 2 parts to it. One is that whether things are excessive, packaging problem, and I think yes, it's very clear that these days when I walk into a supermarket, I'm not sure if it's selling food or packaging, right? The second part is that this is the result of consumers' expectations. And again, yes, because consumers are fundamentally to be blamed for this situation, because demand brings supply. But this demand is fundamentally driven by consumers' yearning for better quality of life. For example, access to food from across the world, hygiene, we've all talked about that, lightweight, durable, relatively inexpensive. And we also need, as consumers, packaging to differentiate and catch the eye. Why has it been so hard to change consumers' behavior for it to be greener? Number one, people have other priorities. So 70% of consumers claim in surveys that they want to purchase more environmentally friendly products. Only 1 to 5% actually do, because of bread and butter concerns such as healthcare, employment, or looking after their families. Number two, how well a product works remains the primary motivator for purchasing choices. So even though 80% of people say they are sustainably minded, environmentally aware, but 74% said that if a product worked really well, they're just going to stick to it over a greener version, right? Number three, consumers are also skeptical of green products' claims, believe that they cannot make a difference, and are generally unwilling to pay for greener options. But there is a new expectation in the market from consumers, which is to be more sustainable. So I believe to influence consumers, we need to focus on 3 E's: educating, encouraging, and enabling consumers to do more. On education, there are 2 topics that I would like to highlight. Firstly, there's a lot of confusion in the words used in the market. For example, biodegradable is used interchangeably with compostable, when actually they are different things. Biodegradable means the material can degrade naturally in nature. Compostable means it requires a special compost facility for it to degrade. And in the whole of Southeast Asia, there are 0 industrial compost sites. So the manufacturing and distribution of all these compostable articles in the whole of Southeast Asia, at least, is a massive waste of human effort, right? The second pet topic that I like to talk about is LCAs, life cycle analysis of bioplastics versus petroleum plastics. Right? For bioplastics, we correctly start with land use, water use at the start of the cycle. But for petroleum plastic, the starting point is when you pump the oil out of the ground. how is that comparable, right? You're not taking into account that it took millennia to make this oil, and that it's finite. On encouraging the consumer, I believe it's very important to choose the right language, right? Because decision making, such as choosing one product over another, is largely made unconsciously. And we are all looking for positive feedback. So well done, keep it going. It's much more important and works much better than wagging your finger and saying, this is what you should do, right? Third part is to give, on enabling, is to give consumers alternatives to plastics. And these need to be truly sustainable and not just greenwashing. For example, the company that I work for, RWDC, we are focused on the large-scale production of PHA, polyhydroxyalkanoates, as a naturally occurring polymer that is as versatile and as functional as plastic, but because it's natural, it is biodegradable in nature. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, and thank you for keeping to time, Zhao Tan. And so, some interesting facts and examples that have been brought up, but one thing, of course, that does stay with me is that quite a lot of people feel that it is working, so why change it now if it's working fine? And they're not exactly convinced that what is supposed to be biodegradable is actually biodegradable, because it's supposed to work with nature and proceed along that direction. To argue against this and to hopefully persuade you, the viewers out there who are tuned into this program, to kick off the discussion, Jacob, you have the floor. 4 minutes is yours.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And obviously, we do oppose the motion that is presented. To us, we believe that the consumers are significantly more sophisticated in their behavior than the proponents are giving them credit for right now. Any consumer would like packaging that provides safety, that provides the necessary quality, and ensures the integrity of the product which they are buying. I don't believe any consumer wants excessive packaging. And let me give you an example, and I think in many ways an example that everyone can relate to. We go down to the supermarket, we want to buy cereals, and we don't really have a choice. There is one box or a number of boxes, and we all know that when we get home, that box is actually only 50% full with the material or the product that we really wanted, the cereal. And I think this is an example of where excessive packaging is illustrated, but where it's not needed. Let me support our argument with another 3 perspectives. And it starts with the consumer sophistication. Consumers today want choices. Those choices are not at their disposal in any shop that they enter. With the middle class growing and with a projection of the middle class increasing with 2 billion people over the next 10 years, those consumers will become increasingly informed in terms of their choices. And all this is really supported not by what we think, but by surveys that have been carried out in different parts of the world. Here in Asia, a survey was carried out in a number of countries, and it showed just here in Singapore that 50% of the consumers that were polled, they actually believe that the supply chain has the responsibility of ensuring that the packaging is minimized. In Europe, a number of surveys have also been carried out, and a recent one that was carried out in 9 countries showcased that consumers are actually willing to even change their retailers in terms of where they are going if they are not providing the type of packaging or sustainability approach that they are offering. And the same could be said for the US. But let's also look at another argument, and we believe that the world is changing. We are moving into a new norm where zero waste and sustainable living is becoming an integral part of who we are as a society, and something that will get even stronger moving into the future. Just looking at Google over the last 5 years, the number of searches on sustainable living has gone up by 1,200%. CEOs from some of the biggest companies in the world is putting sustainability at the top of their business agenda. And universities around the world is starting to offering sustainability courses. This is a new norm that we are moving into through the sophistication, information, and the power of the consumers. We see that there are responses from the private sector. We heard that the CEO of NTUC, FairPrice, illustrated some of the examples that are happening here with single-use plastic bags in Singapore, but similar initiatives are taking place in other parts of the world. We see new retail concepts offering the same type of food and protection of the food without the same amount of without the same amount of packaging material. And the third point that I wanted to make is that industry is picking up the challenge. We are starting to see companies increasingly taking on the packaging challenge, and particularly in the e-commerce area. Amazon, for instance, has launched a program called Frustration-Free Packaging Program that over the last 5 years has decreased the waste generated by 900,000 tons. So the industry is acting, but the industry is not acting fast enough for many of the consumers out there. So we believe that we can do both. We can ensure that we continue to have the right packaging material that provides safety, quality, and integrity of the products, while at the same time trying to minimize the packaging material that goes in to project and protect the products that we are buying. Thank you.
All right, very good. Thank you very much for once again keeping to time. Interesting insights there. I've always wondered when I walk into a supermarket and they put the weight there, and I'm so tempted, like, if there's the weighing scale, I want to actually go and weigh this thing to find out, am I getting what I'm paying for, or is that all lost in the packaging? But I'm not advocating that you go out and start weighing every single thing. But interesting argument raised, and if I heard you right, about 50% means half of the people surveyed wish it could be better. It's a wish, but shouldn't someone take the step forward and put it into action? To argue against this, Mohit, you have the floor, 4 minutes.
Thank you, thank you. So let me pick a point that I heard from the opposition. Consumers are sophisticated about making their choices. Indeed, they are. And let's take an example here first. Talk about millennials. We all know millennials are much more passionate about environment. They're much more aware of the climate change impacts for the future generations. But on the other hand, I'm sure some of you would have seen the trends on YouTube and TikTok on unboxing. Unboxing is a video where the consumer who have just purchased a product is showing the product through unraveling the excessive packaging that's around it. So here we have the millennials potentially celebrating the excessive packaging that is there. So that brings me really back to the motion today. Is excessive packaging, what is the source of that issue? It's not about packaging. I think we all understand and agree. Packaging is required. Packaging has helped transform the supply chains. Packaging provides us the safety, the longevity, the quality of the products we need. But are the consumer choices really prompting the manufacturers to look at packaging being part of an integral buying experience of the product and relating and playing to those choices that the consumers are still showing? So we know the economic theory, right? The basic economic theory is that in a free market, the forces of demand incentivize the suppliers to make the product the way they do and to sell the way they do. Now, it's quite clear that the consumers have not signaled their intent around removal of excessive packages or move towards more sustainable packaging loud enough. And I think this is especially relevant now. If you look at COVID, we are now moving towards new normal. It's clearly an unprecedented crisis in our time. Now, we also know that in the new normals, a lot of behaviors are going to change. So, for example, online and virtual engagements have replaced so many physical meetings that we thought never can be changed to a virtual setup. But this has happened, this has changed. So consumer behavior changed based on a very immediate and direct crisis. Unfortunately, climate crisis, though it has the same level of severity, is going to happen over 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Now, we can't wait for a one-time crisis to happen for consumer behaviors to change. Consumers today understand that this crisis is real, it has impact. The plastics in our waste streams is really a big issue. And they should be more conscious and deliberate about signaling their preferences towards the demand and towards the experience they're looking for. So that's one of the key tenets that we believe consumers can definitely do more. The other point I would say here is, I think on the topic of behavior, we can't legislate the right behaviors, right? So, or change in behaviors. If you look at the data around recycling, in Singapore as we move towards a zero waste nation. And those data points were talked about earlier. Our recycling rates remain stagnant, less than 10%, whether it's 4 or 6. And clearly more needs to be done. Deloitte, together with Singapore Environment Council, did a study where we interviewed about 1,000 consumers in Singapore, and we found 7 out of 10 in Singapore are not aware of how to recycle, and about 40% of them cited inconvenience as a reason for that. So clearly we feel consumers need to be more aware, they need to act, and they need to drive a shift in demand that leads to more sustainable packaging and elimination of excessive packaging. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much, Mohit, and once again, thank you for keeping to time, all right? And so a gentle reminder on the debate verdict, the industry's excessive packaging problem is the result of consumers' expectations. To argue against this motion, Hailin, you have the floor. 4 minutes yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, speakers, for the various meaningful pointers. So to add to my team members' third point on industry needing to react faster, it is indeed so as time is running out, and they cannot expect consumers to dissect the complexity within the value chain of the industry. What do I mean by that? So, although there is no dispute that the use of packaging is to meet consumers' expectations, like what Xiao Tan has mentioned just now, it is unfair to hold them responsible for excessive packaging. How can consumers be held responsible for industry's excess when most of them don't even know what exactly the packaging is composed of, whether it's recycled, as mentioned, reusable, or what does compostable mean? So industries, companies and product designers come up with fancy packaging to catch the consumer's eye, and they usually come in a plethora of packaging materials, as the proposition has mentioned, and many a times in a mix, in mixed composites, so meaning that it's difficult to separate and recycle if it even gets recycled in the first place, and that actually hardly contributes positively to the waste management system. Furthermore, to drive consumerism and justify high price points, some companies value add by creating excessive frills on packaging, like the cereal boxes, which probably has 30% of the air inside, and high-end branded products to try to stand out and create a so-called customer experience. To this point, I actually wonder, how did these excessive packaging practices even become the accepted norm for consumers in the first place? They're probably not expecting the excess packaging per se, just taking it in as part of what's in front of them. So to streamline the circularity of packaging, besides the most important R, reduction, different actors within the packaging and waste processing supply chain will need to come together to streamline solutions for economic scalability and effective material management, which is beyond what consumers are expecting or can expect on the user end. And this is where corporates have to work in tandem with positive governmental policies for real systemic transformation. So on that note, it is actually heartening to know that our government is involved in building industry capability, and through the mandatory reporting framework as well as the extended producer responsibility framework. Actually, this can send a sweeping signal to affected corporates that they need to relook at product design and supply chain packaging access if they do not want to be burdened by waste that they cannot repurpose or resell. Additionally, if the voluntary packaging agreement that NEA started since 2007 to encourage reduction in packaging usage can save 54,000 tons of packaging worth $130 million over 12 years, can we imagine how much more over a much shorter period of time corporates are able to save if the policies become mandatory? So I'm definitely excited about the potential outcomes of the regulations. Therefore, affecting effective excess packaging reduction upstream and at source requires policies tackling the heart of the production and supply chain. This is not something that customers will be able to have easy informational access to and is less relevant to what they expect. To round off, customers, no matter what their expectations are at the end of the day, they are not able to directly dictate companies on how to reduce excessive packaging. And as my partner mentioned earlier, more than half of the respondents in US feel that food brands are mainly responsible for waste in food packaging, which actually means that they are probably expecting the industries to do something about it. And again, in relation to what I mentioned earlier, industries can play quite a major role in shaping what consumers perceive as the norm for packaging. Therefore, we are against the motion of the House, which believes that industry's excessive packaging problem is the result of consumers' expectations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I must say this is the first time I'm doing a debate where all four speakers, you have this sort of mental clock in your head and you all finished it in 4 minutes. Very good. So we actually have questions coming in from the public, and I'm just going to go on to my device here. One question that came in: can we mandate? Oh, all right. So for debaters, I'll take the latest one that just come in. What in your mind are the most radical ideas for reducing packaging or packaging waste? Maybe I'll be fair. I'll kick off. I'm going to give this side of the house a chance to kick off or respond to the questions. Any one of you want to respond to this question? I'll repeat it one more time so while they can. And that's the beauty of the debate. They have no idea what these questions are, and they're coming in fast. All debaters, what in your mind are the most radical ideas for reducing packaging or packaging waste? I think listening to the earlier speeches and listening to all four debaters, no one is talking about completely removing the packaging, right? I mean, you do want your food produce to come in a safe way, and you extend the shelf life so that it finally ends up at your dinner table. Thoughts?
Let me kick off here then. I think just underlining the importance of packaging still. We need packaging to ensure that there is safety, quality, and integrity of the products that we are procuring. What I also mentioned earlier, I think what we are starting to see is that a whole new sector is emerging among retailers in terms of not only providing the good that is being procured and being bought, but also offering close to zero packaging or packaging waste. And one of them, looking at Singapore, is Scoop Whole Foods. It's a store that came in from Australia, has opened up one store initially in Singapore, now having 3 stores. And basically what happens here is you go into the store, you're encouraged to bring your own packaging container. If you don't bring your own, you can take packaging bags. You only take the food that you absolutely need. So there's a focus not only on packaging waste, but also actually minimizing food waste. So I think this is what industry, or a response from industry, is trying to project and trying to implement in terms of minimizing
all right, Jacob, and
plastic waste and waste in general.
There. So we're kind of keeping it tight, and within a minute you need to make a case. That's interesting. I mean, the earlier comments, COVID sort of drove the demand for packaging and stuff, but I witnessed at a food court, mother and daughter coming in, and they actually took out their containers, and they were about to purchase their food to take home to consume, and they brought the containers with them. So that sort of amplifies what you were raising. Doable, utopia, or counter-argument?
I think the radical thing to do is to tax plastic, global tax on plastic. This is a classic textbook case of a market failure, that the market is not pricing in the negative externalities of plastic properly. Now, this is not something that it would be a bit foolish for Singapore to stick our necks out and just do it ourselves. This needs to be a concerted effort globally, because the world works as cheap as they deliver, right? So there's no point for Singapore to do it ourselves. It needs to be a global tax on plastic. Ultimately, plastic is indestructible, and we need to put a price on that the fact that this material is indestructible. I think we're not pricing that properly right now. So the most radical idea I can think of is tax plastic.
All right, and within a minute, thank you, Jean-Tan, for doing it within a minute. But again, kind of a sensitive issue here to tax people, especially when, you know, globally everybody's going through a very, very difficult time. Is the tax the right approach? Counter-argument from this side. Maybe, Hanan, do you want to pick up on that point and see whether you have another alternative? And while you're mulling over that, I'm going to throw over the second question for all debaters. Yeah, they are really coming in, and which is a good thing, right? I mean, people are actually tuned in. Why hasn't Singapore begun tapping reusable packaging, such as what the company Loop has offered in other countries? So if you're not familiar with the company Loop, that's fine, but the point here is, why hasn't Singapore begun tapping reusable packaging that is being offered in other countries? Perhaps, Hanan, you want to respond to that question as well as the tax point?
Right. To the previous question, I actually don't have any counter because I fully agree with Jean-Tan on that. And the point that free plastic bags is actually a privilege, it's not a right. And
so you're actually saying you agree with the tax suggestion?
Yes, definitely. Because in other countries, even when plastic bags are taxed, people are also buying their own plastic bags for trash. So I don't see why that should be different for Singaporeans or for people in Singapore. So that's the point. The next one on Loop. Definitely if we see that the package-free stores take off and everybody can be on board and is responsible for, taking care of the reusable containers, and there is an uptake because since everybody's doing e-commerce for delivery of groceries and all that, it might be a good sort of option to consider for companies to step into the market like in a couple of years if this business model takes off, successfully takes off in the UK or in the US, right?
All right,
Yep.
and so just to be fair again, just within a minute on this side, anybody wants to respond?
I think we are certainly seeing trends of leading organizations looking to revamp their supply chain. To drive more adoption of reusable packaging. That also means that you're doing packaging or the last mile packaging closer to the consumers. Pharmaceutical industry does that very well. So I think some of those shifts are coming through, but I think it's going to take some time as the supply chain, takes time to react.
So you're basically sticking to the motion and you're saying that, it's really the consumers who are sort of guilty, so to speak, in open and close inverted commas. You're smiling.
Consumers can certainly do more.
Yeah. Consumers can certainly do more. I hope you're watching and you're going to make a decision when it comes to voting. But more than just voting on the motion, I mean, another question that comes in here, again, which is quite interesting, perhaps I'm going to kick off on this side and give you a chance to kick off the discussion. Whose job is it to solve this problem of excessive packaging then? Maybe a nice segue from what you just said. Whose job is it?
I think we feel consumers can play a primary role when it comes to excessive packaging. And very clearly by signifying that shift in their preferences, signifying that this is not an product attribute that they aspire for, and also to promote the products and services that come with more sustainable packaging. So obviously the solution need to be implemented across the ecosystem. The manufacturers have a significant role to play, the regulatory environment, the distribution, but I believe consumer has to start to make that shift.
And a quick follow-up, since you did it within a minute, what other signals can consumers send back? I mean, short of that painful B word, boycott.
I think I think we've been doing a lot of awareness programs. I think for consumers to start to now show their knowledge through the choices they make, the buying choices they make. So I can clearly say that in a supermarket, you can see a same product in plastic packaging or more sustainable packaging.
All right.
Pick the one that has got more sustainable packaging.
Okay, convincing there, interesting that the consumers by their purchasing behavior are sending signals back. On this side of the house, go ahead.
I just want to make one point here. I think we have to make the distinction between packaging and excessive packaging. I don't think you will ask any consumer who deliberately asks for excessive packaging. They ask for the right packaging that protects and gives the product that they are buying the service that they are looking for. But excessive packaging, I think, is a misunderstanding that is being asked for by any consumer. I think also we do not believe that banning or taxing or anything on any packaging material for that sense is the way forward. Education is critical of the consumer, but equally much is the leadership role that the industry increasingly needs to take in addressing the issue of excessive packaging.
So you don't think taxes are going to make a difference in the end of the equation?
I don't believe that is the solution going forward. I think there are multiple solutions, and I don't believe taxing or banning or anything like that is part of the solution.
Okay, I'm going to put you both on a spot this time, and this is the next question. In countries such as Germany and Japan, consumers are responsible for separating their waste and are required to do so by law. Have you considered these schemes for Singapore? Again, doable?
I think the key barrier here that is not allowing us to do that currently is the magic rubbish chute that we have across all our housing boards, because that is actually a huge barrier in terms of having people be accountable for what we throw in the bin. So until that problem, or I wouldn't say the problem, until that factor is being circumvented, it will be difficult to do that, but that's the dream, I mean, of course.
Well, it's kind of a challenge for the housing designers to take out that rubbish chute. You're going to be walking 20 floors down, or if you're staying in one of those higher apartments, it's going to be a challenge, no doubt. But interesting point that was brought up here. But the motion again says, are we convinced that there's excessive packaging out there? And is the industry doing what is required before it comes to the consumers? The consumers, after all, they're going to say, I'm at the end of the equation, you know, what do you want me to do? I mean, all I can do is, yeah, I can make a concerted effort to look at the packaging and make the right purchase decision, but are these signals working backwards to the producers? I don't know. And right now, both sides need to be more convincing with their statements. We'll just take one last question and kick off on this side. Can we mandate plastic bottles to be made in a way that requires minimal sorting? Example, cap and bottle made from the same kinds of plastic material. I'll go back to the question. Can we mandate plastic bottles to be made in a way that requires minimal sorting? And please use that question and launch into some other points as well on this side of the house.
I'll start first, and I think this is a topic you can speak a lot about. So indeed, I think we can improve the labeling on the plastic bottles to allow for the right amount of sorting and recycling. But also, I think we need to move to materials that allows for biodegradation. Maybe, Zatan, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so I think bottles is actually one of the few items that are quite well recycled today. But I think we are kind of brushing across away some important problems, though. Firstly, even if you can recycle it, you can only recycle it a couple of times, right? So, and then after that, you can't use it again. So I'm not sure. You know, even if if that plastic you use it for 5-10 times and then it stays in the system for 2 years, 3 years, right? It's a blink of the eye in the face of millennia, right? So I'm not sure if recycling is the right answer at all.
All right, and I think that's a good segue to this side of the house. And since both speakers had a chance to respond, would both of you like to respond on that last point about the packaging itself? And any other thoughts that you want to raise? Yeah.
So maybe let me start here. I think recycling is part of the solution going forward, but I also think that we need to look at the design of the material that's being used in any product, including plastic bottles. What we see today is not sufficient in terms of the recycling possibilities of plastic bottles, but going into the future, recognizing that there may be a continued need for plastic bottles, we can, through investments in material science, ensure that the recycling rate will be significantly higher than what we are seeing today.
I would also like to comment on like how actually materials transcend borders. Because we import so much of our food, we cannot really dictate like how exactly products like plastic bottles or packaging can be like sort of streamlined, because we are only one part of the supply chain. So it's important that we act together with the region as well as with across supply chains, across borders, with other actors as well.
All right. And on that note, we're going to go into the final segment. And I just want to say a very special thank you on behalf of the debaters to all the questions. In case you're wondering why we keep looking at the screen, because the questions that you pose are also being pumped up on the screens here so we can see what you've written. And we have taken as many as we can with the time that we have. Right now, in the closing part of our program, the timing is a reverse. We will kick off with against a motion. And Hylin, you're going to have 2 minutes, and then Mohit, 2 minutes, and then Jacob, you'll have 3 minutes, and then Jautan, you'll have the closing 3 minutes. So I just want to press all four debaters. Some of the arguments you made are realistic, and I'm listening to you both, all four of you as a consumer, but it's sort of a tendency to slip into some motherhood statements. I think right now in this home stretch, both of you have a collective 5 minutes. Can you convince us as to the way forward and speak to the people out there who are eventually going to make the difference? And when I say people, I'm not just consumers. There are also CEOs and bosses out there and SMEs out there who are part of the whole supply chain of the process. So to kick off right now, Hylin, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Okay, so I will be actually using some examples here on the note of packaging contributing positively to food safety and integrity, which we all agree is important. I would like to bring out 2 points. Firstly, regardless of consumers' expectations on certain amounts of packaging, from conversations that we've actually had with supermarkets, some consumers might unfortunately not be at their best when they poke and prod at every piece of fruit and only to take the nicest looking one in the cart. So the management has to step in to wrap items further to protect and prolong their shelf life. A supermarket, not naming names here, told me that they could actually bring in many items unpackaged, even strawberries. But the question is, can all customers treat and purchase them with tender, loving care? In this case, protecting those valuable fruits might take precedence, and society can actually redefine what excessive packaging means through our collective behavior. And secondly, on the industry end of things, packaging and selling certain food items in ready packs of 5 instead of allowing consumers like us to buy only what we can finish might be more economically viable for brands. So, on having to fit in information and messaging on packaging, one might actually consider just having the essential information on the package itself, and the rest can be consolidated and accessed via QR codes. As much as we hope that consumers shop smartly by reading all the small print on the packaging, we know that when we conduct workshops and ask participants whether they actually read the ingredients list, the unfortunate fact is that oftentimes no one in the room will raise their hands. So that said, all in all, based on what my team member and I presented, excessive packaging might still be less of the result of consumers' expectations, but more of the various barriers and entrenched values that industries face in overhauling their systems as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Once again, wonderful within the 2 minutes. And before I hand over to Mohit, it's interesting again that Highland has actually gone beyond this and even talking about stuff that comes without packaging. But can we change people's behavior and not stop prodding? To be honest, I've seen the broccoli there displayed on the shelves, no packaging at all. And then there are other products that are packaged. And so it requires people to be more respectful, right? I mean, we want to prevent the contamination and things like that. So she's taking the argument even further beyond just the excessive packaging to even toy with this notion of, can we even do away with packaging to some extent? Mohit, you have the floor. 2 minutes is all yours.
Thank you. So I think, first of all, we need to recognize that change is happening. Yeah, so change is happening in multiple dimensions, especially the whole policy and regulatory framework in Singapore, the changes that corporate organizations are driving as well in terms of moving to better consumer education, moving to more sustainable practices. But the question here is it fast enough? Yeah, we are moving into the post-COVID new normal. Is the change fast enough to mitigate the impacts that we expect of climate change, and especially the issue of packaging and the waste streams that we have significant targets to achieve? So I think, for me, I think consumers have contributed to the changes. I already see changes in supermarkets when people are bringing their own bags, or coffee store when they have their own mugs. So we see a visible movement towards it, and thank you consumers towards that. I think where probably consumers can do more is really when you have an issue around quality of service in your purchasing experience. You use the social media and come out against that manufacturer and make your say. I think the similar kind of activities, if consumers can do more of on brands or issues around excessive packaging, I think this issue will get the attention it needs. Many manufacturers have already made commitments to move to zero fossil-based packaging or reduced packaging in their supply chains. So that will help connect the dots and help the manufacturers and the ecosystem build new solutions. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Once again, excellent timing within the 2 minutes. And change is happening, and Mohit is pushing the buttons a little bit and saying, go ahead and use the social media to talk about what you expect the producers and the supply chain to be doing, and put out examples and call for action. To make the case on this side of the house, Jacob, you have the final 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, and I just want to echo that change is indeed happening, and we need to embrace that, and I think in many ways we can thank the consumers for that, but we can also thank the industry. Having said that, we do need a significant and fundamental shift in society in order for the change to happen much faster. The consumers has already made their voice clear, and just to reiterate my earlier point, consumer sophistication, they want to be able to make choices. They want to be given the option of making choices in terms of their packaging. Secondly, we are moving into a society in a world where focus increasingly is on zero waste and sustainable living. And thirdly, industry is starting to show that they can take a leadership role. I think what the consumers are asking for is listen to us and increasingly take on that leadership role through innovation, through incubations in developing new solutions to ensure that on one hand you provide the same service in terms of the quality, the safety and the integrity of the packaging without promoting or having excessive packaging. We all have a responsibility, whether we represent governments, whether we represent civil society, the private sector, citizens, or the general consumer. We all want to make sure that we contribute to having a decreasing contribution to our CO2 emissions. We all want to contribute to limiting and hopefully even eliminating water pollution. We all want to contribute to eliminate the leakage of plastic waste into the environment. And just on the latter, on an annual basis, it's estimated that 11 million tons of plastic waste enters the environment on an annual basis. That number will triple over the next 20 years if we do not act now. And that is linked not only to excessive packaging, but in particular to excessive packaging and the need to ensure that the packaging that is being used is only being used where it is absolutely necessary. So we believe that leadership comes from the private sector. We believe that investments in innovation and new solutions needs to come from the private sector. And that will offer the choices that consumers increasingly are asking for. And with that, we can ensure that the same packaging service is being provided while at the same time ensure that we protect our environment.
Thank you very much, Jacob, for making that case against the motion and basically signaling to the private sector to listen to the consumers. Did I hear you right? All right. So, Seah Kian, you have the final 3 minutes to sum up the debate on your case.
All right. I think ultimately we're discussing, we're trying to debate on whether it is ultimately the consumer's problem that's driving this problem, right? And to me, it's very clear that ultimately it is the consumer because the ultimate demand is coming from the consumer, right? So we were talking just now about excessive packaging and nobody wishes to have excessive packaging. I'm not sure about that. Look at Japan and look at how they individually wrap sweets and biscuits and all that, right? Why do businesses do that? Because they need to differentiate. They need to catch the eye of the consumer, especially if you're making pretty interchangeable things. How do you catch the eye, right? Businesses are forced to do this. The other example, if we look at food delivery, why is there so much packaging in food delivery? 3 layers, 4 layers, 5 layers. Why? Because people are because businesses are so driven, especially in the food delivery business, are so driven by ratings and reviews. They cannot afford to have one bad review. Why? Consumers, right? So it's all about consumers being more tolerant. And what I'm trying to say is that this is the situation that we are in right now. Consumers want change, but we're kind of stuck. And how do we help to move things forward, because there is a market failure over here, right? I mentioned requiring a tax to price plastic properly. I don't think plastic is priced properly right now. We need legislation to come in and ban excessive packaging, and it's very easy to do that, right? For example, you can just say that any packaging cannot exceed 50% of a product's total weight. It's pretty simple to do, and it's pretty lenient if you think about how lightweight plastic is. But again, think about all these individually wrapped items, right? Ultimately, I think I want to reinforce that plastic is indestructible by nature, right? So it does not make any sense to be making all this frivolous stuff, packaging, single-use, disposable items with something indestructible. And I don't think recycling solves the problem because all this, even if you recycle it, it does not solve the microplastic issue. And the latest research that we're seeing from my collaborators in the University of Georgia in the US is that nanoplastic, small enough to get through our gastrointestinal tract, it goes into the circulation, it gets stuck somewhere in your body. The body recognizes that this is a foreign object. So it starts attacking it. And this leads to chronic inflammation. And when we took pictures of these chronic inflammation and showed it to health experts, the preliminary feedback is, this looks like asbestos, right? So this is where we're heading with all this plastic in the environment.
All right, and on that rather not so optimistic note, we have to end it there. But I think you made your point, Sautan, so thank you very much once again. So you heard it from Mohit Grover and Xiao Tan for the motion. They believe the industry's excessive packaging problem is the result of consumers' expectations. And arguing against this, you heard from Jacob Dua and Pek Hai Lin. They argued that it is not the consumers' expectations, and industry also has to make a change. Here comes the difficult part. I'm anxiously looking at my poll numbers coming in, and it's also going to be flashed on your screens. So for all of you who have been faithfully following this discussion from the very beginning, it is now time for you to tell us what you think on the motion. The debate verdict, the industry's excessive packaging problem is the result of consumers' expectations. Do you agree? Remember, we had a number before we kicked off in the session, and now we will come to the end of it, all right? God, it's changing, right? Well, those are certainly not numbers, but I would translate that to percentages. Am I right, production team? Okay. Yes, I see the heads are nodding there. I think everybody is frantically trying to get their votes in, right? But am I right to say that the poll numbers now are almost similar to what we had at the beginning of the poll as well, right? In poll, when we kicked off, it was a 47-53. Do you all remember, debaters? 47-53, yeah. It will give the people a chance to come in. And by the way, please do continue to follow us and hashtag us. The hashtag is packaging waste and hashtag EB conversations as an eco-business, EB conversations. I certainly had a wonderful learning experience when we first got on the call, all four debaters and myself, to really talk about this topic. And even before we came onto this floor to conduct this debate session itself, we had very interesting thoughts being bandied about. I think all four debaters will agree, you all should come back for a part 2 and have another round of discussions. All right, production team, can we safely release the numbers now as they are coming in? I see the numbers are kind of settling in. Just give me a signal and I will go ahead. All right, I have a signal. So once again, the debate verdict, the industry's excessive packaging problem is the result of consumers' expectations. 38% agree and 62% disagree. In other words, this side of the house, you have managed to convince. Am I right? It's always very confusing when you see all these things. So this side of the house, you have managed to convince and you have shifted the burden. It's not so much the consumer's expectations, but the rest of the industry and the supply chain, and perhaps to some extent even governments have a role to play in changing this. And please also join me in giving a round of applause to this side of the house for giving them a tough time and making us seriously think. I mean, thank you for that rather somber ending when you got us to think about our body and about what's happening to our consumption habits. But once again, thank you for all of you. The percentages are in, and this entire discussion will be uploaded onto the internet for those of you who want to do further referrals and studies. It's now my pleasure to hand the proceedings back, and I'm going to invite the CEO, Group CEO for NTUC, Mr. Seah Kian Peng, for FairPrice Group to come on and to speak to all of us. Stay tuned.
It has been a most interesting debate. First, thanks to Mohit, Zhao Tan, Arlene, and Jacob. Ably moderated by Augustine. I think I was very interested by the comments made by both sides of the house. But it goes to show that really, you know, that there, actually to me, there's no winners or losers for that matter. This problem is real. This problem, I don't think is, there's no silver bullet to it. There's no simple solution. But what is clear to me is that, you know, we all of us needs to play our part to solve this problem. And it's going to take a multi-stakeholder solution to this. It's going to be a long journey. I have no doubts about that one. But whatever it is, you know, it is never too late for us to do our part. Whether you're at the side of the manufacturer, whether you are a consumer, and we all are consumers, I think it's quite clear that we can all play a part. So once again, thank you to EcoBusiness. Thank you to all the debaters. Thank you, Augustine, for a very interesting session. And I'm sure that all these inputs, all these insights is one way for all of us to move one step forward in the many steps that we need to take collectively to solve and build a more sustainable planet for all of us. So thank you very much, and I have a great week ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kian Peng, for those thoughts. I'd like to echo him by thanking all our debaters and also Augustine for such an interesting discussion. I think when we started the discussion, it was kind of 50-50 on both sides. And I think what I took away really is people have come away thinking that the industry role is actually bigger than we think. And I think that this is a good conclusion to come forward, and companies that are in this ecosystem, I encourage you to get engaged in the topic and really to look forward and think about what steps we can take together. On that note, I'd like to thank again Minister Grace Fu from the Ministry of Sustainability and the Environment, and Mr. Seah Kian Peng, the FairPrice Group CEO, all our debaters, Augustine, the EB team, and you, our audience, for being part of our exciting discussion today. Please continue the conversation with us on our online platforms and with the event hashtags. We've officially come to the end of the event, so I will thank you once again and have a great week ahead.